Hello everyone, my name is Crystal, just in case you're new here, and today I have my April wrap-up for you guys. I was able to read a lot more books because I was in quarantine and self-distancing and social distancing from people. So a lot of socializing was not happening and a lot more reading was happening. So I have 8 books here to tell you a little bit about that I finished, and I'm really happy that I got to these books. A lot of these books were on my TBR for a very long time and I just kept putting them off. So I finally took the month of April to do that and read the books that have been sitting on my shelves because why not? I had the time. So just a little rundown for you. I read a total of 3,203 pages. I read 2 fantasy novels, 4 horror books, and 3 thrillers. They also kind of fit into the horror category as well, but I did break them up that way. So the first book that I have to tell you about is HeartShaped Box by Joe Hill. I finally got to this one and I didn't love it at all. I think this would have been a great short story. Once I got to like the 100-page mark, the book could have ended then. This is a favorite of a lot of people, and I understand why, but at the same time, it could have been a lot shorter, and I found myself getting very bored in the middle of the book to where I was kind of just skimming through the pages a little bit. So this got a 3 out of 5 for me because of the scary content. The way that the ghost was described in this. In case you didn't know, it's a ghost story. A guy orders basically a haunted box online because he likes to collect weird, quirky things, and he's a musician as well. So he collects these weird things, and this one box is haunted by some guy who's connected to like an ex of his from the past who killed herself. It's just like really weird. The plot really wasn't great, but the descriptions and the ghostly part of it, like whenever the ghost would pop up, it was definitely scary. So if you're looking for a book that has kind of like jump scares and like a different view on how ghosts are, the ghost has like swirly eyes. It's very weird, like I said, but the plot really was kind of all over the place and I didn't enjoy it. There was a lot of like rock and roll music references, so I really enjoyed that part of the book. It was super relatable and it kind of set the vibe and the tone really well. But other than that, I just didn't really love it, and it's not a very memorable story at all. I'm sorry if you can hear lawnmowers in the background. I have my window open because it's freaking torture hot in here, but let me close it. Okay. Hopefully that helps a little bit. It's so loud. Next book that I have here is Final Girls by Riley Sager. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 star. I really enjoyed it. It had me hooked to the very end. I just didn't really like the twist at the end, but I don't think a lot of people liked it because favorable characters were involved. But it was really good. And I love the final girl trope so much. That's my favorite type of horror movie. I love the Scream franchise, Halloween franchise, which today as I'm filming this, it's halfway to Halloween right now. I just love the final girl trope so much. So this book really represented that well, and also the inner turmoil that the final girls go through after the fact and like what they have to live with, that was represented really well. Riley Sager is an excellent horror writer, thriller writer. I love Lock Every Door. That was one of my favorite books of the year last year. I love that book so much, and he's just a favorite author. I just can't express my love for him so much. I just love him. He's from New Jersey. He lives in New Jersey. And also, since quarantine, I've been watching the Scream series with him and an Instagrammer, Crime by the Book, Abby. She's been hosting this like watch along for the Scream franchise. So I've been watching and discussing with her and Riley, and it's been so much fun and we all have a really great time. So if you're interested in that, definitely follow Abby on Instagram so you can get more information about it. But we've been having a lot of fun, and it's something to do on a Saturday night since we don't have anything else to do. So 7 p.m. we watch Final Girls and some not Final Girls on Scream and just kind of break down the horror franchise for what it is and what it's created for the horror genre in general, and it's just so much fun. So highly recommend you checking that out if you're someone who enjoys reading and watching horror movies. Next I have here the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and as you guys know, if you've watched my reading vlog for this, you know that I absolutely love this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it turned out to be something really great, and I'm so happy that I was able to read this when I did. And it also just kind of made my mood happier. As weird as that sounds, I finally had a book that I was just like, oh my god, that was so good. I just really loved it. And if you want to know more about my thoughts on this book, definitely check out my reading vlog for it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's a new favorite, possibly one of my favorites of the year. I just love Grady Hendrix, as you guys know. His books are just amazing, and they're funny, and they're horrific, and bloody sometimes, and where his mind goes, you're just like, what? But it's just so good. So if you haven't read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires yet, or if you haven't read any of Grady Hendrix's book, I highly suggest starting with this one, or start with My Best Friend's Exorcism. Either one will get you hooked, I promise. Next I have here a reread, and I reread Horror Store by Grady Hendrix because I haven't read this book in, I can't even tell you how long, I guess when it came out. I thought it was really interesting with the type of cover that it was, so I read it years ago before I even really knew much about Grady Hendrix. I didn't really know what this was going to be about either, but it is like a haunted IKEA store, and haunted as it was a psych ward during the war, and it's basically where sick soldiers or sick people went during, I forgot if it was World War II or whatever it was, but it's so creepy. And as whimsical as this cover is, the story inside is really scary. So if you're looking for a jump scare type of story, and it's a really quick read, it's 249 pages, it's super quick. So if you want to get in a really quick book, I highly suggest this. I highly suggest getting the physical copy though, because I feel like it's not going to be the same reading experience. And you can look at the cover in the back, but also inside there's drawings, and it's not the same experience if you get ebook compared to the physical. This is definitely something you have to purchase. But it's a scary, there's a final girl trope in here. It's horrific and bloody, and he has this weird thing about rats in his books. I don't know why he always writes about rats, and they just gross me out. But yeah, I suggest this one. Also, if you want to start off with any of his books, this would be a good start because it's short. It's a 5 out of 5 stars for me. A lot of 5-star books. A lot of 5-star books this month. Next, I read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. This was for the Constantly Reading Book Club, and I really love this book. This is a new favorite also. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I don't know if I'm just being really generous this month, but I really loved everything that I read. I really did. This is a thriller style Stephen King book. It's not necessarily his horror book, but it's super suspenseful, super thrilling. It's about a young girl who's 9 who gets lost in the Appalachian Trail between New Hampshire and Maine, and she's lost for days and having to fend for herself. And the only thing getting her through to survival is listening to her Walkman and listening to radio broadcasts of Tom Gordon, who is a baseball player for the Boston Red Sox, who she's obsessed with and admires. And it really gets her through this torturous time in her life. She gets lost by accident. She just kind of walks off the trail, and that's it. She loses her family in the midst of that, and she's not found, and her family's looking for her, and she hears helicopters and all that stuff. She knows that they're looking for her, but they just can't find her. Reading about this little girl who's 9 trying to fend for herself in the wild is just really sad, and it just kept me wanting to read. Also, I felt like I was relating to her. I could relate to her so much as a character because I too, at 9 years old, I was obsessed with baseball, and I would have been 9 around the time that this book was written also. So all those old timers of the Yankees, like Bernie Williams, David Cohn, Andy Pettit, like all those old timers are mentioned in this story. So it really just awoken a nostalgic part in me of me being 9, playing softball, being obsessed with the Yankees, and I never got lost on the Appalachian Trail, but I could relate to her thought processes and things that were like making her happy at the time. Also, I had a Walkman, so yeah. This was a 5 out of 5 stars. If you want to know more about my thoughts, I did do a spoiler review on this story. So if you want to check it out, that is up on my channel as well. Next I have here The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. I received this book as an ARC last year. I never got to it. I wanted to read it around Halloween, never got to it. And then I finally was like, I'm going to read this. It's about a library from hell. And it has to do with like gods and angels and devils and demons. And I just love all that stuff because I'm a huge supernatural fan. And I feel like that's very like supernatural, like with the angels and the demons and the humans and all of that. It kind of represents that. And then this library from hell, if like a character who is written from an unwritten story, who was developed from an unwritten story, escapes the story, then this person who's in charge of the library has to go wrangle them back in. It's an interesting concept. I just still don't get it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I did enjoy the characters. The characters were fun, but the plot and the story, I didn't love it. Also, it's going to be a series, which it could have totally been a standalone. So if you're interested in this book, you could totally read it alone. You don't have to go on with the series, I'm sure, because the way it ended, it didn't really leave on like a crazy cliffhanger or anything. But I just didn't love it. It didn't do anything for me, and I don't know if it's because I was kind of slumpy at the time when I read it. This is something I might have to revisit and rethink, but I just don't remember much from the story either. I just felt while reading it, I was kind of bored, and I wanted to DNF it, but I didn't. But at the same time, I just don't really remember much about the story. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars just because the characters I enjoyed. But other than that, like, I don't really like to rate books lower than a 3. That's just how I am, unless I really hated it. But I might revisit it, and I might have a different opinion on it, just like how I did with Ninth House. I read it. I didn't love it the first time, and then I read it a second time, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. So I might have to revisit this. Let me know what your thoughts are if you read this. If I'm alone in having these conflicting opinions on it, because I'm so conflicted about how I feel about this book, especially since I don't remember much about it. But yeah, I almost feel like it was a waste of my time. Then I have this big chunker right here by Sarah J. Maas, House of Earth and Blood, Crescent City. I really loved this story. I was super into it, especially after I got through the first 200 pages. I was really loving the story. And then more towards the end, I was kind of like, okay, can we just like wrap this up already? Because I love her writing. I'm such a sucker for her writing. I'm a sucker for her characters and their romance, even though you guys know I hate romance. But for some reason, her writing is like my secret obsession. Like, I don't really talk about it much on my channel because I guess I don't want to admit it to myself, but I really love Sarah J. Maas's work. Especially Akamath. Like, I really love that. I really love that series. This one has potential, so I'm really excited for the second book. I give this a 4 out of 5 stars because I really loved it. It just should have been a little shorter. That's how I feel about it. The story just kind of dragged on too much, and I can't imagine how thick the second book is going to be after this, but I really love the concept of the story, and I can't wait for more of it. I really love Hunt as this brooding companion. I mean, he's pretty hot. He's pretty hot. He reminds me of Rice a little bit, but a little bit more sensitive. And yeah, I really like this book. It's a fun book. I highly recommend it. I don't want to give too much away because there are a lot of plot twists in here. It is kind of like a murder mystery set in a fantastical world in the future, like hundreds of years in the future. And there's like supernatural creatures just like roaming the earth. And our main character, Bryce, basically works for this society where she has to kind of figure out what's going on and what's killing these things. And yeah, it's really good. Kind of similar to Ninth House a bit, but I wouldn't say that you can compare it to Ninth House at all, but it's similar in like major plot point situation, but the stories are so different, so different. And lastly, I have here The Whisper Man by Alex North. I literally finished this yesterday. I read it within a couple days. I loved this book so much. I am obsessed with this author. I want to know more books by this author. I know that he's writing under a different pen name now, so I have to do my investigations of what he's written prior. He is a British author, which I don't usually love British authors, but I loved this book. And the cover art is stunning. I can't wait for In the Shadows. All kinds of feels with this book. It creeped me out. It made me cry. I can't even explain to you how much I love this. If you haven't read The Whisper Man and you're looking for a horror thriller you can't put this book down. Like, there's no putting this book down. And it's a detective mystery too. So like, usually I don't like to read those. I'm not really into anything that has to do with like the police investigations, but this really was such a great book. It does have to do with child abuse and like child abductions and child predators. So if that's something that you're sensitive to, I don't suggest you picking this up. But this story was just so good. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And I will be dreaming for In the Shadows, which is coming out, I want to say July. It's about a guy who moves to this other town, and there was a horrific event that happened in this town. The person who was responsible for those horrific events is in jail, but somebody is copycatting the same type of murders, and they need to investigate what's happening. But this starts to affect Tom and Jake, who's his son's, lives. I guess that's the best way to say it. I don't give too much away. I'm trying to think like what's the best way of like not giving things away. But you know what? Maybe I should just stop there. I'm really bad at explaining things, but 5 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for a horror thriller that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat, that's going to make you cry a little bit, make you jump out of your freaking seat, because I got spooked so many times in that book, creeped the fuck out. That's all I have for my April wrap up. Hopefully, I can read a lot more in the month of May. I do have a huge TBR for May, and I do have some other books that I would like to add to that. If you're around on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, I will be on Read with Friends live stream where we talk a little bit about what we're reading, and then we pause and we read for an hour together, and then come back and talk about what we just read. If you need some motivation to read, come join us. It's a solid hour. We just pause everything and we read together. So if you need that motivation to make a nice dent in some of your reading for the month, definitely come hang out with us. It's over on Jaqueline's channel, We Be Booking, and I'll leave the link to that down below in case you want to join in. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you now. And if you want to see more wrap-up videos from me, just like and subscribe down below, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Bye!